And then finally, step number 7, the culminating point in the argument. Again, we have a therefore. The claim is that this step number 7 doesn't stand on its own. Rather, it's a logical consequence of the work that's been done ahead of time. So if we then say, well, the universe had or has an intelligent and powerful orderer, and we're going to call that orderer God, then it follows that God exists. I think as a logical move, at that point in the argument, the logic is not problematic. If those premises are accepted for the sake of the argument, then that nomenclature holds just fine. But there is one other interesting point that I want to add at this point that's raised by those who are making criticisms and raising questions for the argument. And for that, I want to just put a thought in your head at this point, and then I'll need to erase the board to make some more space here. And the thought is this. If we take this 7th step, suppose we accept everything in the argument up to this point here as proving strongly or definitively that there is in fact an existing God. Suppose we then take number 7 as fine, and we add to line 7 an earlier line that we will accept for the sake of argument, line 2. That complex order requires an orderer, and we add line 2, okay. And we, on the basis of that, ask the following question: is God orderly? What's the answer to that question going to be? All right, give me a minute to erase the board here, and then we'll take up this question again. I'll put this up here. All right, let's take line 7 and line 2 and ask, is God orderly? I'm sorry?
I'm rolling right now.
Oh, okay. All right, so I've erased a list of criticisms, or at least questions, from those on the other side of the argument here. And the final line that I had down here, I've simply moved it up here regarding this 7th step. Suppose we get down to the 7th step in the argument here, and we are so far, at least for sake of argument, relatively comfortable with the steps so far. If we then take it as having shown that God exists, are there any other criticisms and questions that we can ask? And here's one such question that the critical side of the argument will raise at this point. Now, it's a more complicated thought, which makes it in part fun philosophically, because it asks us to take the argument and pick and choose a couple of points and consider compound properties that therefore emerge. So, as it says here, we're going to ask the question, is God an orderly being, given the premises of the argument that we have here? And the question asks us to direct our attention especially to line 7 and line 2, and then ask the question in that context. So let's do that. Suppose we say that God exists, and things that are complexly ordered, right, require an orderer. If God is orderly, what follows from that? If God is not orderly, right, what follows from that? And this this question rather, is certainly set up in the way that it's asking us for a yes or no answer. So there's two possible answers that we can give here. We can say, either in answer to this question, yes, right, God is orderly. Or we can say, no, God is not orderly. Okay. Now suppose we go on the negative side of the disjunction here. Suppose we are tempted to say, no, God is not orderly. Right? God is something else. What would it be? Disorderly, chaotic, disorganized, to put it crudely, doesn't have his act together. Is that going to be an acceptable answer to this question given this way of thinking about the argument? And the answer then I say has to be that no, this is not a possible answer to the question given the argument from design. Because, so I'll put the point here, we can't say this because. And the reason why this is not an acceptable answer to the argument is that if God is disorderly, then it defeats the purpose of this argument right from the outset. Right? What we're trying to do is explain the existence of an orderly universe, and it doesn't make any sense to say that a disorderly being or a being that doesn't have any order of its own would be able to create an orderly being. Also, it seems built into the argument explicitly, particularly in case of premise 4 here, is that the argument does assume a great deal of order as intrinsic to God. If we want to say that God is very intelligent, for example, well, what is intelligence? Intelligence is a matter of having highly complicated order in one's mind. You have a design that has any number of complex elements, and you know how to move around in that design. If we talk about power, the ability in this context to take a complex design and bring it into existence. That is a multi-step process in many cases, or it's an orderly process. We have cause, the design, and also the actions that God undertakes, and the result is the ordered universe. So it seems that the argument has built into it an idea that God is an orderly being. So the claim here is to say that no, God is not orderly, is that we can't say that because then, right, God, whatever he is, this disorderly being, right, wouldn't be the kind of being that is able to create the orderly universe that the whole argument is about, would not, right, be able to create an orderly universe. So we put a big X down this line of development here. If God were disorderly, from disorder we would get disorder, and the claim that God is not orderly contradicts some of the claims that the argument from design is making. So we can't answer this question in that particular way.